Hey, it's Sarah Burke here from the Women in Media podcast. And before we get started on a new episode, could I get you to hit like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell, whichever app you do your podcast listening in. Make sure you're all set up so you know when there's a new episode and you can help spread the word. Oh, and if you're so inclined, could I ask you to leave a review if the app that you're using does that? You're the best. All right, let's get to the show. I'm Sarah Burke, and this is the Women in Media podcast. You've heard the voice of today's guest on a previous episode. Back in September, I curated a panel of women in country music for the Canadian Country Music Association during CCMA Awards weekend in Calgary. And while she was an amazing panelist, we needed at least an hour to cover just her, if not more.
I don't discriminate. Music it's a language for me, a second language, and sometimes my first language. And so as long as I'm discovering new sounds and new artists, to me, that's what it's about. But recognizing in that moment that I'm going from a hip hop station, which was giving voice to a lot of, communities that otherwise wouldn't have had one, and then switching to country.
The episode you're about to hear was recorded before we had actually met in Calgary. She's currently the music director for NCIFM and Now Country in Winnipeg, where she also hosts a daily radio show. And she's the host of the MJ Show podcast, where she's interviewing country musicians. Please welcome Morgan James, or as her pals call her, MJ, to the Women in Media podcast.
Why, hello, Miss Sarah. This is such an awesome treat. I love this podcast, so to be able to sit here and chat with you, this is amazing. So thank you for having me.
We've known each other for a couple years via email, but this
Yep.
is actually our first time face-to-face. It's really nice to meet you
Likewise.
over the internet.
Likewise.
So how long you been in radio?
I have been in radio for 10 years now, which is insane to say.
What kind of got you itching to get into radio? There's always a spark.
For me, there wasn't a spark, or I had no intention actually of getting into radio.
You're telling me this is an accident? Come on.
It was a happy accident. Absolutely it was, because I had just broken up with someone who owned a business, and through that business I had met this wonderful woman. Her name is Linda Russell, and she was a sales rep at one of the stations here in Winnipeg. And so she came in and sold us some advertising, and we kind of hit it off, Linda and I. So then when my partner at the time and I broke up, I had let her know that I had left the business, and that was that. And so we kind of stayed in touch. And then she said, where are you now? And I was like, oh, I went back into retail. And she says, no. You need to, no. And I remember working at the clothing store I was at and hearing this brand new station. Everyone was freaking out about it. And this pop station. And I remember going, oh, this is pretty cool, like listening to it. And then the next day I had this conversation with Linda and told her where it was. And she says, no, I'm going to call you back. And she called the sales manager at that station and said, I have this girl. She's amazing. She'd be great at sales. Can you do an interview? And the sales manager said, oh, I think we've finished hiring, but sure, have her come in. And so I came in, did an interview. About an hour later, I was sitting at McDonald's, and I had the sales job. In radio.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it just, like I said, it wasn't something that I even ever would have considered for myself. I wanted a career in music somehow, but radio was just never, ever it until that moment.
So funny, eh?
Yeah.
And I find that like after a breakup, you kind of enter a new chapter, and it's really good for the soul to have an open heart and just like go with the flow.
Yeah.
And obviously you did. So where did the sales become? Like, I know you've done some production on air. You're a music director and a program director now. She is running the show now.
And that story is very interesting too. At the same station, we had just gotten a new morning show host, and he was looking for a co-host at the time, and I'm doing my sales thing, and I just liked talking to everybody. The sales thing was great. I was good at sales, but I kind of was a slacker at the same time. So I found myself downstairs, and the morning show host was downstairs with two other guys, and I happened to walk by to go to the ladies' room, popped my head in and heard that they were talking about girls. They were talking about women. These three guys. So I'm like, okay, what's happening? And I walked in, and immediately I'm like, you all are fools. You have no idea what you're talking about. You need a woman in here right now to kind of help, because there were two older guys and one younger dude trying to give this younger dude some advice. And I was like, wow, this poor guy is going to go out into the world and have no idea what really is the truth about women. So I sat down, started giving my opinions, which I am and do a lot. And the morning show guy, without me really realizing what was happening, started kind of directing the conversation, right? He bowed out and would come in only to insert, a question or here. But what about this, right? What about that? And I was down there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, just having this conversation. I was supposed to be upstairs making sales calls. And so the next day, I got a call from our program director, and he said, can we go for lunch to the restaurant around the corner? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to get fired. I was downstairs. Like, I should have been up here doing calls. And now, so we go for lunch, and he says, so-and-so's looking for a co-host, right? And I'm wondering, apparently you had this conversation yesterday, and he's convinced that it should be you. He's like, can you make talking your job? And I was like, I don't know, but okay, sure. And, just that moment being like, okay. And then a couple weeks later, I was on the morning show. That was the first on-air gig I had. But that's how it
so
happened.
Fun.
Yeah. Crazy. But
I mean, you and I have never spoken before. We've only talked through email. And I will say, even before we hit record here, like, very easy to talk to you. You do, you make it pretty easy.
Thank you.
So that's so funny. Totally stumbled into this, and look at you now. So it's been 10 years. You do a midday show now, right?
Yeah. So I've always done a morning show. So when I left the pop station, I came here to NCI. They gave me a home on what was at the time Streets. And that was the hip hop station. And then they rebranded to Rhythm. And then when they rebranded Rhythm, I became the music director for that station. And that was doing really well. It was really hard to sell the hip hop station. As good as it was hard to sell it. And so my heart broke. Money. Yeah. But they said, we're switching it to country. And do you want an on-air gig on the country station? I said, I can't go from a morning show host of a hip hop station and then right away do a country. Like, that's just not, it's not going to work for me. But I said, I can do promotions. So I stayed, and I learned how to do promotions, and, was a natural at that. I found myself enjoying promoting this country station, which is now country, what it is now. And then at the time, we had a music director, and someone else came in to kind of fill in the promo position. And so I kind of found myself in production. And then...
Which is where I would have come across you.
Exactly, which is where we first interacted, because I was being trained by the music director and producer at that time. And unfortunately, he passed as well. And so at that point, I was now in production. So now I'm producing commercials, and I'm producing the Indigenous Music Countdown, and I'm going, okay. And now I'm doing the music director thing for this country station and NCI. And then I fell in, like, head over heels in love with how country music was sort of fusing all of a sudden. Like, the timing was just insane, because knowing that going from the hip hop station and R&B station, it wasn't right. And then when it became right, it was right when the music was shifting in country to where more R&B and those hip hop 808s were starting to appear in country songs. And I was like,
And a lot of really fun like collaborations were popping up.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it reminded me of the 90s, Sarah. It reminded me of like, you know, your Nelly and Tim McGraw, or, you know, it just, and I was like, what's going on? And this is fascinating. So that music director thing led to now I'm a morning show host again on Now Country, and comfortable doing so. And we'll get into that because I struggled out of the gates with being sort of front and center on the station. I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't dedicate myself to the music director position and do a morning show. Both were suffering. So I said, you know, I can't. I'm going to do a midday. That way I can do like a full 8 to 4. Split my time. You know, my lunch break,
Between
I guess,
two
is
things
my
you
show.
love.
Yeah. So and then that's where I am now, and madly in love with this station. Like, yeah.
I love this story. There's so many interesting twists and turns. We got to go back before we get to here. How did you feel at the time being a Black woman on a hip hop station, new in radio, stumbled into it, and then, we're flipping to country?
Scared is an understatement. I was petrified. Like, I was petrified. And the reason I say that it was so, like, the fear was incredibly consuming, was because I felt like it was coming at me from both sides. So I was a really good music director for rhythm. And I knew that for me, most people didn't know and are probably starting to understand that about me now. When I say I love music, I mean I love music. I don't discriminate.
I can tell, and I've been talking to you for 14 minutes?
Yeah, I don't discriminate. Music is it's a language for me, a second language, and sometimes my first language. And so as long as I'm discovering new sounds and new artists, to me, that's what it's about. But recognizing in that moment that I'm going from a hip hop station, which was giving voice to a lot of, communities that otherwise wouldn't have had one, and then switching to country,
predominantly popular, tons of white people.
Yeah, so it was like a total polarizing thing. So yeah, petrified, because I was not only going to get, I mean, I had people telling me I was a sellout from this side, and then I had people, my own at the time co-workers, giving me these looks and asking me these questions when I was given the opportunity to be a music director. They looked at me. One coworker even asked me point blank, so do people like assume that you just like hip hop? And I was like, kind of like what you're doing right now. Like, where's this coming from? You know? Yeah. And so it was, I really had a hard time. I struggled for the longest time, even before I went on air. So even being behind the scenes as a music director, I always had that sense where, okay, girl, you gotta, it's time to prove yourself, right? It's time to prove yourself. And at that point, I was still very much caring about what other people thought of me. You know, I still very much was in that state of mind. But yeah, like, it was hard.
I think a lot of what happens in media is like you become whatever brand you're working for, and you kind of forget to separate the two sometimes, right? That certainly has happened to me. And that's why like a switch in what you're supposed to be attached to is almost like, oh, you're asking me to switch like what I'm about, right?
Yes.
So sometimes it can be really difficult to adapt in those situations. It definitely took me a while. I was almost like pigeonholed as a rock gal, because all I had done was rock radio. You know, I've talked about this on my podcast so many times, but when my boss at the time asked me, hey, like, do you think you could do some country? Of course, I'm in a new position. I'm not going to say no. But like in my head, I'm like, wait, is this part of me? I don't know. And now, like years later, it's like, well, I'm so glad that happened, because it totally diversified my portfolio, if you will, right?
Yep. Yes. Sarah, exactly. Exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. You don't know who you are. I mean, so much of what we do in this industry is a reflection of who we are deep down. And so when you have this moment where you're like, it was jarring. Who am I? So I had to discover very quickly who I am. And am I going to be defined by what I do, what the music that I listen to, the music that I play, am I going to be defined by that? Or am I going to find a way to find myself, you know, through the change? Like, and that's what it became. It was a struggle. And I feel like only in the last year, what people may not realize is even in the last 9 months, have I really started to embrace and not be afraid to say, yeah, I'm doing country. And for those of you who don't think that I belong here from either side, from any community, guess what? I don't care. I don't care. I don't
Hell
care.
yeah. And cheers to that. You know, you talked about opposition from both sides.
Right.
Right. And at first it was like, well, do you get tired of people assuming that you only like hip hop? On the country side, did you meet any opposition from like people who had been in country for a long time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Last week or a couple weeks back, even.
Oh my gosh.
It's still, and I'll tell you, and here's the thing, and I want to say this before I tell you and share this story. I've always been the type of person, I grew up in a predominantly white area. I mean, there was like a handful of Black people in my school. So I grew up always being and feeling different and knowing I had to, like, figuring out a way to fit in. The way I had learned to kind of fit in was to, okay, and this isn't even just about, you know, race or anything like that. It's who I am at my core. I live sort of somewhere in between. I'm always balancing. I can see two sides of any story, and it drives some people nuts that I live on the fence, but that I'm just more comfortable there. I'd rather not be so dead set over here or so dead set over here. I like seeing both angles or many different angles.
It probably comes from compassion.
Compassion, empathy, you know, all of these things. And that's why I get along with people so well, because I can always see, you know, I can just always see things from every angle. And so being that way growing up afforded me the opportunity to go, okay, so I didn't always get angry when someone made a comment that was, you know, like a racial slur, or, you know, there was a moment I'm being discriminated against. I didn't act angry or react at all. I just kind of took it and went, okay, so tell me, what's wrong with you that you think that way? Like, or you know, like, why
like
do
being
you
curious about why? Yeah.
Curious, exactly. I always wanted to know, like, why do you think this way? You know, I was able to remove myself, I guess, from whatever or whoever was directing whatever at me, right? So going into, to answer your question and going into the story, 2 weeks ago, I was at Country Thunder in Saskatchewan. And I had said to my friend, you know, who I've just now started openly talking about what it's like as a Black woman. I had said to my friend, you know, as soon as I get there, I'm going to be counting the Black people. I'm going to be looking for them. Right? Like, I'm probably going to be the only Black person there, and I'm going to be counting them, right? And there was a fear. There was a genuine fear, not of being attacked or someone saying something, but just being alone. No one wants to feel that way, right?
Of course. Yeah.
No one wants to feel that way. So when we rolled up, of course, as soon as we hadn't even gotten through the gates yet, I see 2 Black dudes walking through. I said, bingo, all right, 2 other Black dudes are here. We're ready to go. Let's do this, right? And suddenly I felt good. Like, the more that I saw, the more I stopped, again, internalizing it and going, oh my gosh, like, it's changing. It's changing.
Yes.
And of course, don't forget, I'm there to see Morgan freaking Wallen. So, right? Like, there's that. I'm thinking in my head, oh, Lord Jesus, I cannot post that I'm at a Morgan Wallen concert, right? Like, I'm freaking out the whole experience. I'm like, I'm just going to post and talk about Hardy, even though I love Morgan Wallen's music. I can't dare say that because someone's going to attack me. Like, these are all things that nobody, I don't think, or nobody but me is going to think. I had a minor panic attack. My friend calmed me down. The next day, we get into the VIP section, and I'm there to interview Mackenzie Porter and Sean Austin, and I'm feeling good because, you know, you're in the VIP tent at this huge festival, and I'm feeling great. And a gentleman comes up to my friend and I. My friend came with me to kind of film the interviews and whatever. And he comes up to us and he sticks out his hand and he goes, "Oh, I don't think I've, you know, met you before. I'm so and so, and who are you?" And he's talking to my friend who's white. Assumed that, you know, what station are you from? He says, and who are you here with, or whatever. And I'm standing there like, he's not even barely acknowledged that I'm there. And my friend goes, you know, "I'm Lori, and I'm here with her. And
I'm her plus one, by the way.
Her, exactly." And he kind of, you know, to avoid the uncomfortableness that he was going to feel, I instantly stuck out my head and I said, "Yeah, I'm MJ. I'm from, you know, Now Country in Winnipeg." And, "Oh, okay, you know, whatever, you know." And then the question is, "Have you always been doing this format?" Valid question, I guess. Right? You know, valid question. No, I started in pop, actually, right? Because you don't want to go, you know, I didn't want to go, "No, yeah, I did hip hop before this."
You didn't want to give him that, yeah.
I didn't, right? But then, you know, my friend said you weren't angry, you just kind of whatever. And I said, because there's no reason to get angry. This is what needs to change. The assumption is what needs to change. This was a moment to change that.
And to help him learn.
Yes. And this gentleman, and he was great about it. Like, he didn't even act mortified, or maybe he hid it well, but he didn't seem mortified, because I think that that's a fair assumption. And that's what I mean by sometimes we can be so quick to get so angry and call people this, "You're a racist and you're this," and like, it's like, whoa. Is it not a fair assumption, though? I'm the only Black person in the room. There's me, and then there's a white girl. Who are you going to assume is there to represent a country station?
I get
It's
that.
not going to be me.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, right? And the flip side of that is, you know, if we were at a hip hop festival and same two girls, me and my friend, the assumption would be that it's me there, right?
Yeah.
So I was not angry at all. And he didn't mean anything by it. He just was like, "Hey, white girl, country, go," right? It's like, fair enough, right?
Yeah. And you know what? The fact that he started a conversation, right? Even though it was obviously at a point where he could have started the conversation with both of you is the part that bothers me about this, right?
Yes.
But the fact that he was just introducing himself to people, like, we need more of that in general anyway, instead of like radio station standoffs, like.
Oh, and that's the part, Sarah. That's the part that I was like, he came up and was so genuinely excited to meet someone new he hadn't met before, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, oops, right? You stuck your hand out to the wrong person. Oopsie daisies, right? So, but those are the things that a lot of people wouldn't realize that, you know,
that's unique to your experience.
That's very unique, you know, and as this is, you know, a women in media podcast, I mean, I've got it, you know, when we talk about intersectionality, like, I've got it twofold, you know. There's a certain understanding, you know, between women, which is why I'm so grateful to be with you today, because you can understand how I felt in that moment with this gentleman at Country Thunder, because it's the same way I feel when I'm in a room with all dudes. And it doesn't matter, you know, they could be people I've worked with my whole life. Mm-hmm. And some people don't even realize their own what's the word? Chauvinistic. Like,
Yeah. Narcissistic qualities.
yes.
Here's what's also interesting to me. You're doing the interviews, you're programming music, you're doing a show.
Yeah.
Why would someone not assume you're in charge? Sorry. Right? You can do it all.
Because that's just the way. I mean, this industry, I love and hate it. I love and hate this industry. I love it more than I hate it. Some days, some days, some days I despise it.
Yeah.
But what I love is that it's given me the opportunity to really, really grow and pay attention to it. When you think about media, it is 100%, for better or worse, a representation of the way the world is. Because we're either, shoving what's happening in the world down people's faces, or we're creating what's happening in the world and then shoving it down people's faces. That's what, and
it's a mirror for sure.
We all know, you look in the mirror, we don't see things the way that they actually are. At all. That's what's been fascinating about it, is being on this side of that. Like figuring out what you want to say and how you want to say it and who you're going to represent here. And, people are like, well, who are you representing? What community are you representing? I represent me. That's it. That's the only responsibility I have. And if other people connect to that, cool. If nobody does, cool.
This kind of leads me into one of the reasons that we got connected. I was recording a podcast episode with Kezia from Advance. And we get talking about country music and Black programmers and opportunities. And then we both together are like searching the depths of our minds, being like, is there a Black country programmer in this country? And at the time when we recorded, we actually could not think of a name. We did not know a name. Started emailing country music programmers that I know and love and asking, hey, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone? Genuinely curious, but also like, I would love to hear more about that perspective, right? On this podcast. Yeah. Kezia right away was like, if you find a name, you got to tell me. Here we are. Amanda Kingsland gave me your name. Do you know Amanda well?
Not well. The name only.
Okay. I know that Kezia was thinking of you for some work coming up with the Canadian Country Music Awards. This comes up once a year, right? It's an annual event. And I got to wonder what's going through someone's mind like yours. Every year, it's almost like a chance to reflect, like, how well have we done? How do you feel about things like Country Music Awards?
Well, it's interesting because this year was the first year I actually became a CCMA member. And it was the first year that I made it onto the second ballot for Country Radio Personality of the Year. I looked at I looked at my name, didn't make the third, but making the second ballot, I thought, that's 10 names in the entire country. And when I saw the list, because I went in to vote, and I looked at the list twice, and I was like, okay, well, this is a tough category. Who am I going to vote for, right? And I scrolled past my name twice, I think, before realizing that it was actually my name. This was a moment for me that felt like a long time coming. At first, it had nothing to do with being a woman or being a Black woman. It had everything to do with, I think I realized in that moment that for a lot of years, I had not been putting myself out there because I was afraid that I wouldn't be welcomed. Not that anybody in any sort of way had ever made me feel like that. In fact, it's the exact opposite, right?
It's been very welcoming. I found that too about the country
scene. Very, very welcoming in a way that transcends anything I could have ever thought. But again, I was just afraid. Like, I would never post anything. I would never reach out to people to do interviews, let alone share the interview. I was so just apprehensive and scared to show myself, right? And then, like I said, only in the last 9 months, Dale Peters in this industry. We connected right away.
I love Dale.
Yeah, he just right away because he's such a silly,
He's such a silly guy.
a silly being, but our mindset like matched instantly. So we struck a friendship right away, and he really became in this industry. No, you're here, and he listens to my show every day, and he really helped me understand the Canadian country music scene and that hell yeah, I belong. Hell yeah. And so after that connection was made with Dale, I started to believe that. He saw this in me. And he said, "No, you're breaking boundaries, and that's long before we talk about the fact that you're a woman and that you're Black. You're breaking the rules already, and changing things." And so he gave me the courage. He helped me find the courage, rather, to go full steam ahead. And I haven't looked back. And so in 9 months, to go from, okay, you know what, I should be a CCMA member. Let me throw my name in there. Cool, right? Or just even to be a part of the voting process. That's what it was for me. And it's like, yeah, I want to vote, right?
Yeah.
This would not be happening if I didn't allow myself and embrace my power. Really, that's what it comes down to, right? We keep ourselves so small, but I would not have been able to get to this place, I can tell you, without the Canadian country music industry.
Love that.
And the music.
You're leading me into my next question here. I can tell just from talking to you how great it must be to be interviewed by you. Tell me about a great interview moment with an artist.
Oh boy. Oh gosh, I've had every interview is a great moment. I'll tell you about one. Mikhail Laxton is a phenomenal artist. I connected with his spirit and his music, right? So when I got to talk to him, that was really the first interview where I started understanding who I am, right? As a person, I like people. I like getting to know people. And if I don't understand, like, I need to understand people.
Before you can understand the music.
Exactly. So that was the first interview that I had done that watching back, I didn't go, oh my gosh. It was just really natural. It was a conversation. And then from there, Karen Kozowski was one where I was physically ill, sick with nerves to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because to speak to such an incredible songwriter who's written so many amazing songs that I love, Tim Hicks and What a Song Should Do, and then Mickey Guyton, again, that level right there where it was just like, I need to be able to talk to her about where...
You probably over-prepped so bad for that one.
And it's so funny. I wouldn't call it over-prep.
No.
It's my prep. I prep like crazy. Like, again... because I need to know about people, right? So, I was really nervous about doing that one, which turned out to be an incredible. Of course, with her being from here, it was amazing, from Winnipeg, and then from there, Sarah, I was starting to build that confidence, and I reached out to Brianne at Big Loud, and I was like, I need to interview Ernest. Can I get that? Yeah, no problem. I was like, well, hell yeah. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
And then, so actually that moment with Ernest was what did it for me, what kind of changed the trajectory for me, because Ernest, number one, being so connected to Morgan Wallen and having written that Morgan Wallen, most of the songs on that Dangerous album, which I loved and still love. It was the first time where I was like, oh gosh, like, do I go there? Do I say? Do I,
Yeah.
And that's where it clicked for me. Absolutely, you do.
Nothing's off limits like that. Yeah.
Nothing's off limits. You are talking about music and music only. Stay in that lane. And so when we started that interview, one of the first things that I had to ask Ernest was, I had read his bio, and what drew me to him when I first heard, and this is long before flower shops. I mean, we started playing Cheers long before.
Okay.
Right? And so I had read that he grew up a rapper and liked Space Jam, the Space Jam soundtrack. And I was like, what is this now? You mean to tell me the dude who wrote the majority of the songs on that Morgan Wallen Dangerous album is a rapper?
What?
And it clicked in I thought to myself, look at you go assuming, right? Look at you go assuming. Whoa. And that's where I thought, there's two sides, man. There's two sides. And that's why I thought, if anybody wants to come at me for playing Morgan Wallen, supporting anybody who supports Morgan Wallen, I will have a great conversation with you.
Yeah.
I will have a great, it hit.
Yeah.
And then I asked Ernest, okay, so what was your favorite song on the Space Jam soundtrack? Sarah, do you know he dropped into Hit 'em High and started rapping? Rapping! And I was stunned. And again, being able to share, it was the first time I shared an interview that I had zero fear.
Like a no edit situation. You were like, nope, it's going out as it is.
As it is. And you know why? Because it connected my two worlds. It connected for the first time the people who still followed me from rhythm hip hop days and the new followers I had gained with the country station. For the first time, I was seeing a reaction from both sides.
I love it.
And I thought, this is where we go. So now it's gone there, right? So now every interview that I do and anybody that I talk to, it's just 100%. I'm more relaxed, I'm more calm. It's about getting to know them, and really digging as deep as I can, because that's who I am. So
bring it on.
Yeah, it's been really crazy fun. It's been really crazy fun.
Have you ever got to interview Morgan Wallen?
No.
So intrigued to hear a conversation between you and Morgan. Like, what do you think you would ask him about how he dealt with that and what he learned?
I wouldn't ask him at all.
You never would? No?
Nope. And here's why. That situation, and I'll take it back, okay? Because again, I'll take it back to the day that I got a text from our morning show host. Morgan Wallen got into trouble. He said the N-word. Oh my gosh, radio stations are pulling all his music. Whoa, what are we going to do? Are we going to play him? Oh my God. I had barely had my coffee. And I'm like, what?
And I love that record. Why'd you do that?
I was like, I got to deal with this. I got to deal with this now. Like, that was my first thought. I was like, I haven't even had my Timbs and I got to deal with this. Morgan Wallen is like right now half of our rotation. And what am I going to do? And I got to fill this. Like, as a music director in the business, I didn't even have a second to think about my own personal feelings about it before I was thinking about, what do I replace? What do I do? Because my first reaction was, we got to follow suit. We got to pull him. That was my first reaction. And it bothered me.
Yeah.
Something about me feeling that way bothered me. And so I went on the air and I was sick to my stomach.
Of course.
Because I love that album. And I love and adore Morgan Wallen, and the reason why I do is because he is so flawed. I gravitate towards people who are messy and who aren't afraid to say, oopsie, I'm kind of a disaster. My friends are disasters. Sorry, I love you all.
Yeah.
But you're disasters. And I connect better with people who are messy than people who are seemingly perfect. Actually, those people scare the ish out of me. I feel like something is hiding in a closet somewhere that we're going to find out on Dateline was there the whole time. Like when I meet people who are perfect. So Morgan Wallen was that artist for me where he was just a 20-something-year-old, let's face it, no offense to guys, but he's a 27-year-old dude, and he's a country star, and he's, And so when I went on the air, I knew I had to talk about it. It was like, do I talk about it? Do I not talk about it? I knew I had to because people are going to be looking to, number one, we're an Indigenous-owned station. So conversations about race and systemic racism and whatever is very much present. So I couldn't ignore it. I wanted to. But when I got on air, I thought, okay, what am I going to say? And so I said, I'm a fan of Morgan Wallen. I heard what happened. Listen, we all know that word has a history of hate. We all know that even though rappers use it, come on, right? What are you doing, right? Morgan Wallen, you're kind of an idiot. You know, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, get inside your house if you're going to say stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I also said this cancel culture, you've got all these stations jumping on board to cancel him and take off his music. But I asked the question on air and I said, how many of these people, how many of the organization's program directors and music directors actually took the time to sit down with each and every one of the radio personalities who are now having to go on the air and say, we're not playing Morgan Wallen, we're taking them off. How many music directors and program directors talked about it with them and had the about why they thought it was wrong, so wrong for them to pull his music? Nobody. It was reactionary. It was, he's gone. It was more about, we're going to get in shit, people. Pardon my language. We're going to get in trouble.
You say shit as much as you want, by the way.
Thank you, because I have to.
You're all riled up. You got to.
It was more about, and this is across the board, and I'm assuming here, but it was more about, we don't want to get in shit if we keep playing him, so let's take him off. It wasn't about whether or not what he said was right or wrong. That's not what it was about. And that's what cancel culture. Yeah. And I thought, because it was, for me, my first reaction was, we got to pull him. Before even going, whoa, do you agree that he should be pulled? Because to be honest with you, and I've said this to people, and I've had this conversation with people who have said to me, you listen to Morgan Wallen? Yep, I do. And they go, oh, yeah. And they go, oh, he's a racist. I was like, listen, okay, first of all, do you know what it's like to walk down the street and have someone, or walk in the bay and have someone say to you and your mother, go back to Africa where you're from? No, you don't. Do you know what it's like to have your father and brother accosted and called the N-word just riding their bikes and paying them? No, you don't. So when you've actually lived it, and then you take into consideration what the actual scenario was, with them, I'm not going to throw the word racist out so quickly until I'm just not going to do it.
The comment was racist. Is he racist? Is the question you're asking.
And that's the question I'm asking, right? That's the question I'm asking. And for me, I live my life, Sarah, with two things. Really, one, intent. We are all going to get hurt. Someone's going to hurt us. I'm going to hurt somebody. My question is always, in those moments when I'm hurting someone or someone's hurt me, did you intend to? Was it your intent to make me feel smaller than you? Was it your intent to make me feel badly? Because if the answer is no, I did not intend to, I was kind of not thinking, it just kind of came out that way, or, if that's the case, I will still feel hurt, but I cannot hold that against somebody. I can't.
You'll be able to find forgiveness if you know that there was not intent.
It always comes down to intent for me.
Yeah.
And when I look at the Morgan, perfect example, I said to somebody, again, I was having a conversation with a couple of Black friends, and this conversation came up. I said, can we first of all start talking about R. Kelly, please? How long was he doing what he was doing and we were still playing everyone Ignition? Right? The Ignition remix was on every station for years after we knew what he was up to. I don't know. Sounds to me like he intended to hurt people. So again, can each side for 1 second look at each other and go, ooh, okay, right? I just feel like we can find some common ground somewhere. And so I actually that day played Morgan Wallen after I had this whole, statement. I played Cover Me Up, and I said, you know what? I hope that one day he will grow and live up to the power of this song because it's my favorite song. And I played it. And boy, did I get off the air, Sarah. And I was like, okay, I'm looking at my emails. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting in trouble. Not a peep.
No one's complaining about something like that. You're being real.
But intent. So when you ask me if what would I go there with Morgan? No, I would not bring it up. For me, it doesn't need to be brought up. For me, he knows what he knows.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, he didn't pay for nothing. He's walking around. He's still making it. The dude paid. Yeah. The dude paid. He was embarrassed. More than that, ashamed. You could see the man. He had to have conversations. And you know what it was for me, Sarah? He had this conversation with an ABC, whoever it was, interview, a black man. And he asked Morgan, is that a word you use? And Morgan said, only with certain buddies. And I know that's not, some people will be like, oh my God, she's laughing at that. For me, it was like, this dude, he just was so honest. He was like, yeah, with certain buddies. And come on, if we're really being honest with ourselves, how many things have each and every one of us said in the comfort and the privacy of our own homes or
just
with
not
friends
got caught? Yeah.
Exactly.
How many people are saying those things anyway, but just when they don't think anyone's listening?
And when he said it, when he openly said, yeah, just with certain people.
Like the dude also just needs time to grow up. That's a part of this whole thing.
He can't not be himself. He can't not be himself. And I thought that, because everyone's like, oh, see? Ooh. I'm like, Morgan Wallen, don't scare me.
I feel like I could talk to you for hours, honestly. But
likewise.
You know what? We might just have to be friends. It's fine. But after all that you said and your full circle here with radio, I got to wonder too a bit about rhythm stations. There's nothing in Canada right now that stands out. And we just in Toronto, I'm sure you heard it, over the last year, lost Flow 93, which was one of those last standing. How do you feel about that? Could you ever see yourself trying to build something back up? Because I know you love that music too.
Yes. That is one of my goals one day. That is one of my goals.
Perfect. Let's put that out in the universe because,
it's out there because I think, and here's what's fascinating, Sarah. I think that what I'm doing, what I've done for myself is, and for people who, follow me and whatever, is that I feel like I've bridged the gap, at least for myself. There's no longer a separation. It's more about mood and feeling and expressing these moods and feelings than it is, oh, I like hip hop. Oh, I like jazz. Or it's all the same.
Right.
If your ultimate goal is togetherness, inclusivity, uniting, then in my opinion, the first and only way to do that is through music. It has nothing to do with color. It's becoming 2022. It's becoming united. And to turn on the TV and see Breland, performing songs like Praise the Lord with Thomas Rhett, hearing that church, that gospel influence into country. Do people not know where country music started? Do people not know how country music came to be? And that's not to say, because people are like, oh, black people started it. Okay. Okay. But what I'm saying is, if you stop and think about it, when we talk about the South, especially in the States, right? This is the sound. Okay, great. But it was rock and roll. You had rock and roll. You had, soul. You had, you go down to Nashville and it's like a mosh pit of sounds, right? Like, So it just boggles my mind that people are surprised that it's going this way. And then not even that far back. You don't even have to go that far back, Sarah. Well, you can go probably for you and me to the 90s and go, in the 90s, man, I was listening to everybody from Alanis Morissette to Darius Rucker to Green Day to Puff Daddy to Spice Girls. It was a disastrous, beautiful mosh pit of music. It was everything. Right? At the same time, you had Shania and Garth and whatever. Like, there was no separation. The children of the 90s did not give a shit about anything except for the music. Like, come on. We had free thinkers like Kurt Cobain coming out and telling everybody, oh, you know, even Marilyn Manson, for goodness sake, was putting out things that was making you think, right? Like, and challenging Rage Against. Right? Like challenging the system that wants us to be divided, right? Like, so come on. If we can't be together where it matters, which is music and art and expression and whatever, then we don't have a shot. And so in country music, I am so proud to be in this genre. Country music has just opened my heart wide open. But yeah, that's why I'm proud. I'm proud because this shift that's happening isn't just a music shift. It's a systemic shift, right? It's for North America, especially. It's a wake up call, people. So, and the Canadian country music scene, especially the Canadian country music scene, has the best opportunity, I think, because we are realizing some things about ourselves in this country that are not so pleasant.
We're looking in the mirror.
Not so pleasant. Yep. Oh gosh. So yeah, things are shifting and it excites me. Some people are scared, not me. I'm excited.
Oh my God. I don't even know how to close this podcast after the keynote speech you just gave. Please go. Honestly, I have one more question.
For sure.
Yeah, with the Indigenous-owned NCI network that you work for, and I ask this from a curious place because, you know, I sort of got this at SiriusXM when I was programming the Indigenous channel. You know, do you get the questions about, well, are you even Indigenous? Like, why does this make sense? You don't. I love that.
Never. In certain scenarios, maybe, like, you know, if we needed to, like when the 215, I didn't feel it was my place to speak on certain aspects of
course,
what was happening. I could only speak towards what, from my perspective, what it was making me feel like. But we have Indigenous, you know, staff and on-air staff that I felt, you know, not that this is their story. Because, I mean, I spoke with Don Amaro and Cal McKierney recently and about their song. And I was a nervous wreck about that, too.
Really?
Yeah. And because I wanted to make sure that I didn't take away from their message by inserting my perception. But I needed to make it clear to both of them when we were talking that this isn't an Indigenous community conversation. This is all of us. To say it's Indigenous history means that every other person is removed from what happened throughout history. We are not.
Yeah.
We are different cogs in the wheel. Like, you know, we are different, whatever, but we are very much a part of the story. And so I wanted to make sure in talking to them about it that is how I felt, but it also didn't take away what it meant for Indigenous people.
Yeah.
Or to Indigenous people.
Of course.
And so, but never, to answer your question, Sarah, have I ever felt, and again, being a member of a minority group,
right?
There's a level of understanding there.
Yeah.
There's a level of understanding. And again, this is my home. I found a home at NCI where I've been able to flourish as exactly who I am that I would not have had anywhere else.
Right.
In this market, and safe to say throughout Canada.
Yeah.
NCI has given me a home. This is my family.
Yeah.
And so no, I've never dealt with that. I've never heard it. I've never heard it outwardly, but I certainly don't feel that that's the David McLeod has supported me and really been a champion for me, even though we've disagreed on many things.
It's a healthy relationship.
Exactly. But there is a mutual respect there because of that. So yeah, I've never felt that. And I'm grateful for that. Grateful. It's a good question.
Before we wrap, I would like to know who you would want to nominate to come on the podcast. I asked you to think about some women that you admire in the industry, and a lot of names you actually mentioned already. Some of those women have not been on here yet. Who you got?
I have to say, Linda Russell. I mean, oh gosh, she started in the 80s and as a salesperson. And in the 80s in radio, where like men were still, hey there, toots, and openly smacking your booties, right? Like, how do you even navigate that, right? And she's a tiny, cute little, blonde woman. And how do you, tough as nails.
Okay.
I nominate her. She's by far the first person that came to my mind
because
because she.
Still?
I believe so. She's kind of bounced around lately. She's retired. She's in Costa Rica doing her thing. But you'll figure it out better than I can. But if memory serves me, she understood this business, and she was also like a personality as well back in the day. But she really, when she understands this business, and she taught me, even though I didn't listen at the time, what it meant to be a woman in this industry. And I'm smiling.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on in that head of yours right now?
Well, because it's interesting, and I say this, and I don't know if I should, but because, I mean, it's funny because women talk about being treated a certain way by males, especially that, like I said, the toots and the hey doll, and especially if you're good looking. Oh my gosh, the assumption is oh my gosh. But pros and cons to everything. And when you work in an industry where men are men, you can either fight it all the time, or you can find a balance and make it work for you. And Linda taught me that.
Embrace the feminine things.
Right? And if you can't embrace that part, I mean, it's different than being, like I said, slapped on the ass.
There's a line.
Yeah, there's a line. People asking me with it, so you and your co-host, you guys must be sleeping together. No, dude.
Like,
no.
Oldest story in the book. Nah.
No. Yeah. So, but yeah, Linda Russell's one for sure. Krista Morand is another woman that I worked with in the pop station, and she's a really fascinating woman in media. I met her at, like I said, 10 years ago at the pop station. She was midday. She had just come back from Ottawa because she had just gotten her master's in something or other. I can't remember. She'll forgive me for not remembering that. But she had also done rock, and she loves doing interviews. She's a voice actor now as well. But musically, oh my goodness, she does rock, eat, repeat on Instagram. So she does like a blog. Fascinating writer. She writes for our papers here and things like that.
Oh my God, I want to
too.
check her out. Yeah.
Yeah, Rocky Repeat. So this girl, when you talk about obscure, like punk, all that stuff, her wedding invitation was a poster, for goodness sake, a freaking punk rock poster. She's one of my favorite people, and she's inspiring.
I feel like we definitely need to find a way to hang out in person when we find ourselves in the same province or whatever. Thank you so much. I know you have a huge weekend ahead with programming, so thanks for making the time.
Sarah, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be on this side of the conversation.
Loved it.
Because I'm pretty sure I talk too much in most of my interviews anyways about myself.
Hey, that's what every PD has ever said to me. This happens. You were also the kid that talked in class?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I do what I do. So, but no, thank you. I appreciate you so much, Sarah. You are an inspiration as well. So thank you.
I've got all of MJ's info in the episode notes if you want to check out the MJ Show podcast or any of her work. And I can't wait to see what she does next. Up next here on the Women in Media podcast, I'm excited to interview Christine Simpson of Sportsnet. She's been reporting in hockey rinks around this country for decades, and you'll hear more about that on the next episode. Until then, thanks so much for listening.
A woman of ill repute is a person who's found success in non-traditional ways, often risking the disapproval of society. They're usually fearless, and more often than not, they're quite funny. They're certainly interesting, and sometimes inspirational. I'm Maureen Holloway, and along with my friend, noted broadcaster Wendy Mesley, we talk to these women on our podcast, and we call it Women of Ill Repute. You might like it. Lots of people do. And all you have to do is listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or you could go to our website at womenofillrepute.com. That's kind of our online home. And while you're there, it wouldn't hurt you to sign up for our newsletter. I'm just saying.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.